Well, thank you very much for reading. I mean, I was always told as an author who kind of lives in that world, I only write reality as I experience it in certain ways, that nobody wanted to read those books. So it's been wonderful actually getting to release those books and find that people do want to read them.
Bueno, pues bienvenidos a todos, bienvenidos a Sara Lee, esta soy yo. Hoy estoy con la grandérrima Seanan McGuire. Como podéis ver, estoy muy nerviosa, estoy temblando muchísimo. Y bueno, vamos a hacer una pequeña entrevista con ella. Así que vamos a ver. So, I wanted to ask you first, for example, I have started writing a bit because of you. Because I wanted to, you know, kind of emulate your style. And so I wanted to ask you, when you started writing, was there any author you wanted to emulate or imitate?
I think everyone kind of wants to emulate. When I first started writing, I really wanted to write like Ray Bradbury or Stephen King. Those were kind of my goal, and to a certain degree, I can't say I've gotten fully away from that. I do the same sort of poetic, let me just word vomit for 300 pages that Stephen King does, and a very, very standard sort of, my mythology will travel from book to book, even if it's not a shared world between them, much like Ray Bradbury does. So I think you hold on to those early influences, even if you think you got away from them.
Oh, that's very nice, because I was thinking, oh, okay, so maybe I won't get away anytime from your style, you know.
You will drift. It's inevitable. Every author starts out sounding like the people that they like to read.
I'm sorry, it's just like I feel like so dreamy, you know, like this is like kind of a dream. So it's like listening to you like here 1 meter away is like, oh my god. in every heart a doorway and down among sticks and bones, I'm sorry. We see like there's a lot of reference. Well, there's kind of an inspiration from Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan a bit. I wanted to ask you about the inspiration or the origins of the idea for the Wayward Children saga.
So I'm a folk musician, which means I'm a part of the folk music tradition of science fiction and fantasy. Wow. We write songs about books and stories and television shows that we enjoy, and then we sit in hotel rooms and sing them to each other with guitars. It hasn't really caught on much in Spain. It's fairly big in Germany. We have 2 folk conventions in Germany every year. But I've been a filker for most of my life. I've recorded several albums of filk music, and one of the songs that I am best known for is called Wicked Girls, which is basically about the girls of the classic children's portal fantasies and what happened to them after the story. So Dorothy, Alice, Wendy, Jane, Lucy and Susan, that sort of thing. And when Tor.com asked if I would write them a novella, I basically wrote Wicked Girls as a book, but obviously I didn't want to write it about other people's characters, so I had to figure out how to pull out those characters that the song had been about and replace them with people of my own.
So you have come up with a huge saga now. The On Journey Came From Across the Green Grass Fields was book number 6. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, from a song you have come up with this huge series. I think that's really amazing to do, like a huge reach.
Well, you have a copy of Middle Game there, and Middle Game was really inspired by a song by another filker about the doctrine of ethos. So I got that book out of one song, and then I got a whole series out of another one.
Really?
Music is powerful.
Yeah, so powerful, and I'm so happy you did that. Well, one thing I love about your narrative style is how it seems to me that you are like telling the reader a secret. It's like, hey, come with me, I'm going to tell you something that not everyone knows. So I wanted to ask you if you feel that way, if you come up with that voice. Had you thought about that voice before writing it, or it just came up as you were writing? Or?
Its voice is determined largely by the tense. All of the books of mine that you have on this table and that you've mentioned are written in the third person. Mm-hmm. So Sarah did, Sarah went, Sarah said. And third person omniscient is a perspective where you are doing Sarah did, Sarah sat, Sarah went, but you're doing it as if someone were explaining that rather than it's just a function of the book. And so if you're writing in third person omniscient, that is inherently going to bring a certain amount of come with me. I want to show you something. You have to have a storyteller on the other side of the story. The majority of my work, weirdly, is in first person. You went, I went, I said, I sat. I haven't really done much in second, which is the you.
also second person has this kind of, can be forced into the reader, so it's like cool, but it can also be like kind of weird to the reader, because you're like, okay, so I'm going to whatever place, or I'm doing whatever. It's like, this seems like this feels weird.
I've seen it handled well very few times.
Yeah, by N.K. Jemisin.
Yeah, no, I know Nora.
Yeah.
N.K. Jemisin does a good job with it. I'm trying to remember the name of the author. There's a gentleman who wrote a book called Halloween Land that opens with a second person chapter that's absolutely glorious, because it's just, you have been here before, you know this road. And that's beautifully handled, and it pulls you into the story, but second so often isolates you from the story, because you're like, well, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I meant. Like, it doesn't feel like you, as it's so forced into you. Yeah, the reader may not like the book because of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally understand what you
I
said.
find that second mostly works in choose your own adventure stories, because then it's, you enter the room, there are 3 things you can do, which one do you choose? And since you've made a choice, even if the next piece is a little bit out of character, it feels more like you.
So talking about middle game, you have said several times that it's a very personal story because of one specific scene, and I wanted to ask you, like, how did you prepare mentally to write that scene, and what advice would you give novel authors to do those harsher scenes? Because I mean, I love Middle Game. It's one of my favorite books ever, and I have never said this. I mean, I have never said like, okay, I have a very good book. No, but like Middle Game, when I read it, was like, okay, this is definitely the best book I've read in the year. Like, of course, but years have passed, and I'm like, this may be one of the best books I've ever read, ever. You know.
Thank you. So preparing, you have to know it's coming. Don't surprise yourself with, oh, this is where the story twists. If it's something that might hurt you as an author, know that it's coming so you can prepare yourself, so that you've got the day of, I'm going to write this scene, and then I'm going to go and drink a hot chocolate and sit with my cat for a while. If it's something you don't have to write, find a way around it. There is no shame in saying this would do me harm, because if it would do you harm, it could do your readers harm. You know, that scene I do worry about. I talked about on Twitter, I gave lots of content warnings to be like, this is here. If you need to not read this now, that's okay. I will never blame you for not being in a place to read this. And try to understand why your story requires that painful thing. You know, why you have to do it, and what the motivations are for putting it in there. Never use anything that could do you as a writer harm just for shock value.
Sometimes there are scenes that there's like, I don't see the need for the author or the writer to put this here and to have this image in my head, because there's no reason. But of course, for Dodger, it was, and for Roger, it was huge. It was something that was very important.
Yeah, we built toward it right up to the point where it happened. I find that sexual assault in books is most often like that, because you'll have the people who are clearly trying to process something. It doesn't even have to be something that happened to them. It could be something that happened to a friend, but they're trying to emotionally get past it, and so they build a story that is supported by that happening. And then you have the folks that are just like, well, if I do this, it'll be shocking and edgy. And your readers can tell, so never do anything harmful to be shocking and edgy.
So, totally agree with you. Actually, I read a book which had a sexual assault for a child, and I read that with a friend, and it was like, why? Was there really a need for that scene? I mean, I think you could convey that same message with maybe something lighter, you know, with something more, not so harsh, not so shocking and edgy, as you said.
Right. You don't always need to see it. That doesn't mean that even the bad stuff doesn't need to be written. There's a comic called Saga, which is written by Brian K. Vaughan, and at one point they rescue a little girl who was being kept in a very bad situation. She is hanging out with Lying Cat, who is a cat that just says lying anytime someone says something false. And so she's just chilling with this cat, and we kind of know what's happened to her. And she's talking to the cat, like little girls will talk to cats. And she says to the cat, once there was a little girl, and she was bad and dirty because of things that had been done to her, and the cat just says lying. And that tells her entire story. You didn't have to see her get assaulted, But knowing that she was, and having the power of her saying, I am dirty, and something that can detect lies saying, no, you're not, that's a big deal for children or for adults that were children in that situation.
So something I really love is that all throughout the Wayward series, there's a lot of like logical and nonsense words. But something that fascinates me is how they all kind of have their specific rules, and they are, for me, it seems like they are a bit morally gray. They're like a kind of ambiguous. So, like, how did you come up with those specific rules, and how do you come up with those ambiguous worlds?
So the characters that we deal with in this series have divided worlds according to what they call the compass. And the compass says, is the world logical or nonsense? Is the world virtuous or wicked? Yeah. But look at the world we live in. Can you honestly say that Earth is logical or nonsense? Which does it follow? We have more rules than a lot of the nonsense worlds would. The gravity is the same day by day. But we literally know that less than 100 people are currently murdering our planet by continued reliance on fossil fuels and prioritizing profit over the lives of humans. We could put those people on a bus and drive it into the ocean and fix the world, but we don't, and it would be morally wrong to do so. But it does start to bring that question of, are we logical or are we nonsensical? Which is it when you just stand by and watch someone drowning kittens? So I look a lot at the real world and how much our rules don't necessarily make sense from minute to minute. And then each world is built according to one of the primary rules of that series is that if you find a door, if you are in a bad enough situation that a door will open for you, it is because the world on the other side is one where you could be truly and genuinely accepted and happy. And as a consequence, the worlds are built around the people that go to them to a very large degree.
For example, but in An Absent Dream, I felt that it was like very specific. Like, is it fair if it's not fair and you don't go through with the deal? You're going with so you'll go with feathers and later on with the.
You will be punished by being turned into a bird.
Yes, it's like it's very harsh punishment. Could you just explain to me maybe a little bit further how was in An Absent Dream portrayed
for Lundy?
Yeah, Lundy.
So Lundy is one of those people who has the somewhat in our current world character flaw of expecting the world to be fair. And capitalism is inherently unfair. Is it unfair that in America, in most places, it's about $100 fine to litter? And what this means is that for my mother, who has always been a minimum wage worker at best, she's currently working in a grocery store, for her, littering is forbidden. It might as well be murder with the level of you can't do this that is associated with it. But for my friend John Rogers, who is a television producer, he has so much money, it's free. He could just litter all day and never notice. Is that fair? If it's a crime, shouldn't it hurt them both? We have rich people buy their way out of murder. Jeffrey Bezos, who created Amazon, paid no taxes in the state of America, in the country of America last year. He paid no taxes on either a federal or state level because he has so much money that he can afford lawyers who can play ridiculous shell games to keep his money from going to the government. I don't have that much money, so I pay my taxes. Is that fair? Everyone should pay taxes because that's how we have roads and schools and medical care. But is it fair that if you're rich enough to the point where your taxes would really help a lot of people, you can afford to not pay them? Mm-hmm. And so that level of capitalism is an inherently unfair system really pulls over into the goblin market because it is a sales place. It's a mall, basically. Yeah. So how do you create a completely capitalistic environment that is also somehow fair? And part of that is taking equity over equality.
Yeah, it's true. And it's like really opening my mind because, for example, An Absent Dream is one of the words I like the most. But it also knows me in that, for example, if you don't go on with the deal, that's a harsh punishment to take humanity from you in such a way that you become a bird. Which is also kind of cool, but also kind of, hard. And thank you a lot for the insight about In An Absent Dream, because as I said, it's like one word that I'm really curious about, it's really interesting to me. There's another, the Come Tumbling Down. I loved how the meaning of monster went like above and beyond.
I love the Moors so much.
Oh yeah.
I don't think I'm going to be able to stay away from the Moors for too long. I would like to go back.
Okay, that feels great. I wanted to ask, because you're such a prolific author. For example, this year you have launched 2 books in English so far. I mean, we're only in July.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I wanted to ask you, how do you write so many stories and so much powerful stories at the same time? And also, doesn't it happen to you that maybe the voice or the story of one story will slip into the pages of another?
Do you like to watch television?
Yeah.
If you're watching one show and it ends and you turn on a different show, do you worry that the first show is going to ooze into the second?
No.
So that is what writing is like for me. I turn off one show and I turn off the next show, and they're very, very distinct. So I'm not as worried about voice. I write every day. That's not a requirement to be a writer. You can be a writer and write once a month if that's what works for you. If you want to be a really prolific writer, you're probably going to have to write every day or close to every day. I'm enjoying Spain. It's lovely here. It's a beautiful country. The fact that you can't eat dinner until 8 p.m. at night is driving me a little bit out of my mind. Last night, we didn't finish eating dinner and I didn't get back to the hotel until almost 11. And that's not okay. I'm like, I should have finished eating and be back at my computer by 7:30 in a normal world. So I was working till 2 a.m. because
in a normal world.
yeah, once I get to my computer, I start to work. And that I've been working the whole time I was in Spain. I'll work on the airplane home. And that is partially because I have a problem. But I am addicted to working. It makes me happy. And it enables me to tell a lot of stories. There's a musical, I don't know how much traction it got over here, but it came out a couple years ago called Hamilton.
Yeah.
And one of the songs, which is kind of aimed at Hamilton, is going, "Why do you write like you're running out of time?"
Yeah.
And when that soundtrack dropped, every single person I have ever met sent me that song. That is how, is just never stopping.
We were laughing so much because it's always like, yeah, for example, when I go out and out of Spain, and Germany and so on, and yeah, they have dinner at 6 from like, okay, come in. For me, it's like a snack.
You get used to what you're used to, and that is perfectly normal. Everyone's normal is valid. My normal says you eat dinner at 7. What? And you eat and then you're done. This thing where you eat and then you sit at the table and you drink wine and talk. I'm like, no. Why are we here? The thing we came here to do is finished. If we're going to sit around a table not doing anything, we should play D&D. Like, that is what happens now, is we play Dungeons and Dragons.
You know that the word in Spanish for that thing, it's not translatable into any language. I don't know if you knew this. Well, the word is sobremesa, which is literally means over a table. So it's like, yeah, the talking you do in a table and so on. That's just an anecdote for you.
That's kind of cool.
Well, next year you're going to publish Where the Drowned Girls Go.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell us about the book? What can we expect from that book?
Well, Where the Drowned Girls Go, if you've read enough of the Wayward Children series to have caught on, the odd-numbered books follow the timeline that begins with Every Heart a Doorway. So that is the earliest book in the odd-numbered sequence. And every book that comes out after that is set after that. So Every Heart a Doorway leads to Beneath the Sugar Sky, leads to Come Tumbling Down. The even-numbered books take place in the portal worlds, and so they are at a completely self-contained timeline. You know, Down Among the Sticks and Bones obviously takes place before Come Tumbling Down, but does it take place before Across the Green Grass Fields? We don't know.
No. Yeah.
We know that In an Absent Dream is probably the earliest book we've seen so far, but otherwise they're very nebulous. So Where the Drowned Girls Go is an odd-numbered book. It's going to follow off of the events of Come Tumbling Down. So it involves our core cast of characters that keep recurring and kind of seeing how they are dealing with what happened in Come Tumbling Down, what the consequences have been. I can tell you that none of the Moors characters are in it. Those doors are currently closed.
currently.
They are staying home. They're good. Like, no thank you. We are not up for adventures. We are up for lightning storms and horrible experiments with dead bodies.
Classic Jack.
Very classic Jack. Well, we do get to see the other school. So there are two North American schools.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm assuming, I don't know for sure because it hasn't come up, but I'm assuming there's at least one, if not multiple European schools. Because it doesn't make sense that if a Spanish teenager found a door, that their parents would ship them to America. Like, okay, kid, you've clearly had a break with reality. We're sending you to a country where you don't speak the language and no one can talk to you and everyone eats dinner at 6 p.m. Have fun with that. Like, it's not going to be good for their mental health.
Of course.
So there's probably a school of some sort, if not in Spain, then in Portugal or somewhere near Spain.
That's going to see, not France.
Not France.
No, not France.
Pretty sure there has to be a school in France because no French parent would send their children out of country just to help them get their sanity back. But there's got to be at least one European school, probably a bunch of them. But there are two North American schools. There's Eleanor's and then there's the Whitethorn Institute, and we actually get to see Whitethorn,
which is like more for dealing with trauma, right?
Well, Whitethorn is where the students who don't want to remember go. So that's not, like, they're really kind of both about dealing with trauma, but Eleanor's is about saying you were traumatized and you can be okay with that. You don't have to erase your memory to be okay. And Whitethorn is like, denial! It's fun! So.
Yeah, because, I mean, as you said, it's like, Eleanor's is like, you want to go back, and Whitethorn's, you said, it's like, I don't want to go back.
Yeah, and we do get to meet a couple of Whitethorn students who have very good reason to not want to go back, but there is a certain level of reminder that children don't get a lot of agency. You know, if you're 12 and you come home after being missing for a year and say, Mommy, I went to a world where the rain can talk and I don't know what to do, I want to go back there, your mother can choose to pack you off to Whitethorn even if you desperately want to go back to the world where the rain talks to you. So there are some Whitethorn students that probably would have done better at Eleanor's.
So, Sara, thank you so much for being with us today and for lending us your time.
Thank you for having me.
And I hope that you can get your dinner at 6 or 7
the
latest.
Well, tonight I'm having dinner at 9, but I should be back in America by next week, and my cats will be very happy to see.
So, bueno, pues muchas gracias por estar con nosotros durante todo el vídeo. Me encantaría que, bueno, me dejáis en comentarios qué os ha parecido. Un like se agradece, un subscribe también. Y bueno, yo me voy que estoy muy nerviosa. I'm really a huge fan of your work, and would it be okay to ask you a photo of you and me?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.